want to say hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have you here, and I'm excited to kick this topic off. Like I said earlier, it sparked so much interest at our last event, and I think that there's a lot of us that are trying to figure out like what does the next step look like into UX, or what does that even look like, for example. So before I get started, I want to pass the baton to Jeff. He'll be telling us a bit more about our host, IXDA, who is letting us host this event on this platform, is making this, reality for us here during the COVID times. And he's going to tell you a little bit more about them, about their group, and their upcoming event. So, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. ISDA Atlanta, they've been kind enough to host the event on their Zoom. So we very much appreciate that. We are both here in Atlanta. ISDA is a local chapter of a larger organization. So if you are in San Francisco, maybe Toronto, they may have a Canadian version. I don't know for sure, but they probably do. They are a large national organization that deals with UI and UX. So they are a fairly comprehensive organization, and they do large nationwide conferences. ISDA Atlanta is one of their larger chapters, but probably not the biggest, but they do monthly events. And obviously they've been virtual like everybody else has been for the past year, but they're looking forward to hopefully getting back to in person, in the next few months, I believe, if you're in the local area. And if you're interested in UX, if this particular topic has sparked an interest in you, if at the end of this event you go, I really do want to, try to make that transition from content over to doing UX, UI, that kind of thing. They're a great organization to look into, to join, whether it's a chapter, ISDA Atlanta here, or whether it's your local chapter, wherever you may be. They do great work in really raising awareness about UX and UI, and giving a lot of good informational talks, discussions, online events, to help you better understand what that industry is like and how to get into it and how to do better if you are in it right now. Their next event is actually tomorrow night. Virtual is going to be, and I think probably apropos to what we're doing tonight, is called Mentor Mania. So 7 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow, they will be having several experienced UX UI designers and content strategy people on the line, and you can jump in. They'll be doing breakout rooms with those professionals who have been in the industry for years, and you can get a chance to talk to them and learn from them, ask questions, that kind of thing. I've seen a few of the names. Some really good, talented people are going to be on there. If it's something you're interested in, I would absolutely encourage you to join them for that. They put on great events and they have really good people. And obviously, anytime they're doing an event, certainly if this is a topic that interests you, then anything they're doing would interest you as well.
Cool. Thank you, Jeff. So before I move on to the next slide, just so if you want to learn more about us, want to see what our events are, please feel free to check out our Meetup page or our LinkedIn. That's where we tend to post our upcoming events and any new information like potential job openings and listings that we may hear, and just want to really help out other professionals in the industry. All right, T, can you hit the next button? All right, so you may be wondering who this crazy lady is talking on here, but just to give you a little bit of insight, my name's Nadine, and I'm one of the co-founders and member of Content Marketing Atlanta, along with Jeff Hawes, Dio Wong, and Tadero Reed. For those who are new to the group, Content Marketing Atlanta was created by two content marketers looking for a way to engage with other content marketers in the metro Atlanta area. And we were basically looking for a space where we could meet other like-minded individuals like us. And we realized that Atlanta market was severely underserved in this regard. So we put our two brains together and decided to launch this meetup. In real life, we usually host an event like this every other month, and in-person events in between at local breweries, where it's more like relaxed and can kind of do more networking. Of course, that's changed and we had to move virtual due to COVID. So huge props again to IXDA for giving us this platform to keep things going. And so, as I mentioned before, if you ever want to see what we're doing, what we're up to, check out our Meetup page and our LinkedIn. And you can also reach out to any of the beautiful folks here to learn more and ask them for advice, questions, or to just get to know another human. Next slide, T. So now for the main event. So at our last meetup, we covered the intersection of UX and content strategy with Scott Kuby, who's a very well-known influencer in the space. And a lot of the questions that we got in the chat was like, how do you break into UX? What does that look like? And so we decided to follow it up with this one. And so for the structure of this event, we're going to be asking, trying to do like a live Q&A with seeing the senior content strategist at Carwell, Andrew, and really kind of using him as a way to like learn more about his experience and journey and like what kind of takeaways we can take from him and how can we apply that in our like journey to UX. But also want you guys to feel free to put in any questions that you may have in the chat as we will try to bring them in and weave them into the conversation. We definitely want to answer your questions, so feel free to input anything that comes up in there. So I'm going to hand it off to Delia to kick it off. And wait, actually first, sorry. Want to hand it off to Andrew so that he can introduce himself and tell us a little bit about him.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Nadine. Appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here tonight. It will be really exciting for me to talk about my journey from journalism, in my case, to UX content strategy. It's a very personal story for me, something I take a lot of pride in. And I've really enjoyed just everything I've learned these past few years and how it's impacted me, not only my professional life, but personal life as well. And so super excited to share this story. And I'd just like to mention early that if you have any questions or want to continue the conversation with me after this, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me. I can drop that in maybe later on. I just love connecting with people throughout the world. And that's something we've actually done during this COVID time is talk about UX and UX writing, things like that throughout the world with people. And so that's really rewarding for me. So really excited to share my story tonight and happy to be here.
Great. So I'm going to let Delia kick it off with the first question. And I think you got to unmute her.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I was on mute. My first question to Andrew, just given the fact we see a lot of the term UX out there, especially when it comes to roles, UX writer, UX designer, UX content strategist. Can you tell me what UX content and content strategy means?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's being kind of figured out a lot in the industry right now. My title is a senior UX content strategist, but in a lot of ways, I feel like I do the same thing as like a UX writer or a content designer within my field, things like that. So I think overall, all these roles have the same goal, and it's just to make a user feel empowered to accomplish their goals within an app or user interface. And so we want to use words to provide clear, concise instructions and directions, labels, things like that. And so I think about that a lot in my job, like how can I make the user feel like the hero of their own journey when traveling through our app and the various parts of the app that I support. So there's a lot of different terminology out there with the titles right now, but I think the UX writing world all boils down to just writing in a clear, concise way and a methodical way, an intentional way that helps the user accomplish goals within whatever experiences we're building for a software company or other areas in the industry. So it's been really rewarding for me to learn the various nuances of this industry over time. But I think even though we have a lot of different names with our titles, I think there's a lot of similar just day-to-day practices with our jobs that we all share. And that's a common thing throughout the industry.
Thanks for enlightening us a little bit. I know it probably evolves along the way too. In the early days when you came on board with UX, what did it look like? And what did your previous role look like before coming into UX?
Yeah, it's really interesting for me. I never thought I was going to be in UX even 5 years ago. If you would have told me, like, you'd be doing this now, I would have been like, what? What's UX? So it's really interesting where life goes and the twists and turns you take along the way. But I was a journalist and I wanted to be a journalist forever. Ever since I was a kid, I kind of fell in love with narrative storytelling, reading long form journalism and sports journalism in particular. I grew up in a town, Dodge City, Kansas. Have you ever heard like get the hell out of Dodge? Like that's where I grew up. So I spent 19 years there and I read the Kansas City Star. That was kind of the nearest metro newspaper for me. And I read that online and, there's some great storytellers who ended up being pretty famous, like with ESPN and other areas later on in their careers. But I read them when they were at that paper and they kind of kind of gave me the passion for what words could do. And here's this little kid out in Southwest Kansas, middle of nowhere, but I was reading stories about like Latin America's influence on Major League Baseball, and they were going to Cuba and all these places to report stories. And it was like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that with my life. So anyway, that's how I caught the bug for just writing and storytelling. I started working for my hometown newspaper in high school. One of my earliest jobs was writing like box score game stories on Friday nights for football season at my hometown newspaper. So I'd take like the box scores that came in on fax machines back when we had fax machines, and I'd write little like, one paragraph blurbs that would appear in the newspaper on like 20 games or something each Friday night. So that was my early start. But anyway, I continued on with that a little bit in high school, covered other things like basketball and football. And then I went to college at the University of Missouri School of Journalism and had a lot of great experiences there, and ended up spending about 8 or 9 years in the industry from 2010 to 2018. I had various roles. I started out like freelancing in New Orleans. I went out to St. Louis and covered like the Cardinals, the Rams when they were in St. Louis. Now they're in Los Angeles. And then hockey, and then some college sports around Missouri too. And then I traveled down to Tampa and did the same thing there with the pro teams there. And then I moved up to Atlanta here for a job where I was covering college football. And so anyway, I was continuing on this path and thought I was just going to do this forever. And the things happen in life, and the journalism industry is tough. And I had 2 layoffs in 3 years. So the second layoff happened in 2018, actually just before my wedding, a couple days before. So I had this interesting scenario where it's like just before my rehearsal dinner, I'm taking calls from HR about my severance and all this. It was really weird looking back on it, but I knew I needed a change in my life. So I was just searching for any writing related roles at that point. And I wanted to stay in Atlanta. So I was like, okay, I'm applying for marketing jobs. I'm applying for PR and trying different things. But I had a friend who's a product manager at my current company. He's like, you should apply for this UX content strategist job. And I remember I had to Google what UX meant at the time. I was that ground level. I'm like, what is UX? Like, UX, what does that mean or whatever? So it's kind of funny looking back on that. But I've grown within the role since, and it's been a lot of fun to enter the field as someone who is just kind of like raw and learning on the job, and just see myself and the field grow at the same time. I've noticed, especially within the past year and a half, there are a lot more UX writing jobs opening around the country here in the United States and the world. I'm seeing just more opportunities, which is really exciting. So you're seeing like the first UX writers at companies be hired, and they're creating processes and creating style guides and things like that. So I feel like it's a field that's only going to continue to grow. And we're starting to see this, incline that's been happening for a year and a half. But I think we're only kind of on the bottom slope still, keep going up, and there'll be more specializations created maybe within these roles. So we'll have certain concentrations as UX content people that don't exist right now. But I think for me, it'll be really exciting to see this grow as just UX as a whole continues to evolve, and then the UX content subset within that matures over time as well.
Yep.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about those early days, and then along the way you mentioned you've grown with UX. What does that mean, and what did you use to educate yourself along the way?
Yeah, it's really funny. I had to kind of teach myself the job in a way. I had a great manager and a great, support system around me, but a lot of it was learning on the job. And I remember reading a lot of like Medium articles and trying to join Slack groups related to UX content and things like that, and just to discover voices on LinkedIn too. That's something I still do to this day. I'm trying to find interesting voices who have cool opinions or sharing interesting stories or blog posts, like just educating myself about the field. So I did a lot of that early on, and actually did this thing where I created an onboarding doc now that exists for new UX content strategists we hire at CallRail. But I just created a list of all the resources I use to learn on the job. It's like 30 plus links of Medium essays and YouTube webinars from people at like Google and things like that, UX content strategists there. There are other things too, just interesting things I found, like style guides. And I really kind of learned how companies that are known for UX content, like how they approach things, and tried to study their voice and tone and things like that, and see if I could apply it to my work at CallRail. So it's really interesting to, see that in the early days there and where I was. And now I'm just much more confident, and I've had more experience, and that's great. And I've also seen the field grow along with me in a way too. UX content and UX writing have been around for a while before I joined in 2018, but it wasn't like 10 years before where it was like some big mature field. It's something that has really been kind of expanding rapidly, I feel like, in the last few years. So it's fun to see that growth and consider where it could be in the future. And I view people like myself too have made that career transition. I view we have a responsibility to try to help people break in along the way too, because there are a lot of people like myself who were former journalists or been some other job in the writing field who are interested in UX content, and I'm trying to help them too as they try to break in.
Yeah, well, we have another former journalist who is on our team, Jeff, and so I'm going to pass it over to him to go over the next question.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask, Andrew, as a former journalist, sports journalist, in fact, we have a very similar background. I know how different what you're doing is from what you did. I know I know that world, and I know the world of content as well. I've been in both. What has been the transition from that long form content to short snippet content? What has that transition been like, and what have you found? Like, have you found where have you found sort of that inspiration to write in that manner and to transition that way?
Yeah, it's something I've asked myself actually during my journey. And it's like, how did I go from this love of long form writing, which I still enjoy, and I enjoy like reading literary writing and things that make me see scenes with words and things like that, to what I'm doing now, which is what we call it microcopy, but it's the words you see on a screen. And the goal is not to overwhelm a user with text or something. But I think I'm just a word nerd. I love words and like different forms of copy. And I think when I joined this industry, I just wanted to get good at it. I was like, this is a new challenge for me. I want to learn the principles. I want to learn the most effective way that I can create value for my company with my role and things like that. So that's something I've always just done. And as a sports journalist, I was the same way. I studied certain sports writers that I just admired the way that they wrote stories. And I studied the structure of their writing. I'd go beyond the words themselves and actually like try to outline what they were doing with just scenes and like explanatory writing or whatever in my mind, and be like, that's cool how they had like an opening scene there and wrapped it around at the end of the closing section of the story or something. So that's how I thought about words then, and it's somewhat similar now with my UX writing job, where I'll read something within our app that was maybe written by someone else, and I'll be like, okay, like what was their approach there, what kind of terminology did they use, what is their sentence structure like, and then if it was effective, try to do the same thing with my own work. So I think it goes beyond just the amount of words or maybe the kind of words that are used, like a bunch of adjectives or something with descriptive writing. I think it's about studying the structure of words. And I love that. I love studying the X-array of a story or X-array of microcopy or something, and seeing how things are put together and why they were put together. And especially with UX writing, there's a lot of research involved and just intent behind every word. So you're studying different areas of your content ecosystem with blog posts or support articles to see how things are described with various tools and products that you work within. So for me, that's really kind of fun and nerdy. I get a kick out of it. So I think I just learned to transfer that over from my sports journalism life, where I was studying these certain forms of writing and things I enjoyed, even like opinion pieces and how they crafted a column and things like that, and then brought it over into my current work, where I study how effective microcopy is made and the thinking and a thought process behind that process.
Yeah, I've said to many people over the years, there is no better training ground for any sort of writing than covering high school football and
That's true.
If you ever get the opportunity to learn how to write quick, and you probably won't, this is the thing, but almost no one's ever going to do it. But if you ever got the opportunity to do it, you will be better for it. You'll be a better writer, you'll be a better interviewer, you'll be a better deadline hitter, whatever. But you will be better at everything that has to do with writing and organizing your thoughts, and interviewing and talking to people as well. A question came in actually having to do with interviewing from Tiffany and Tucker. Do you remember what your interview process was like? Was there anything in particular you think helped them to win the hiring team over?
I wish I could just bottle this lightning, and transfer it over to other situations throughout my career. But I think a lot of it had to do with networking and knowing that product manager at the time, my friend who referred me to the job. I think his voice had a lot of sway with the hiring manager, and overall within the company, he's respected. So I'm thankful that I knew him, one, and that he was kind enough to refer me to. And I think that helped me get a foot in the door and get into a face-to-face interview back when we did in-person interviews in offices. But yeah, I think that was so important, and it's hard to understate the importance of that. I think as you go through different situations in your career, I think you need to network and know people, and it helps when you're trying to, if you're interested in a certain company, it helps if you know someone within that company where they can refer you. So I think in my situation as a career changer, especially, I think having his voice say, hey, you can trust him to make this transition from journalism to UX writing. He's ambitious enough, he's driven enough, he can handle it. I don't know if I doubt I would have gotten my job if I didn't have that voice there, because it's a leap of faith in a way from a hiring manager. If you just are, looking at this resume, he's like, he's been a journalist forever. He doesn't have this background, without that voice having my back in that situation, I don't know if I would have got the interview. But anyway, once I was actually in the interview process, it was just explaining certain stories throughout my journalism career about, things I had to deal with on the fly, that deadline writing, like you're talking about, dealing with situations that I didn't expect that came up and how I adjusted with that. And I talked about working with other people within my organization. It's similar to what I do now with working with designers or product managers, people like that. So they want to know that you're a good coworker and that you can work within a cross-functional team. So I describe situations like that within my journalism life. And then I remember one question was like, how would you describe a situation where you had a project and it took like a last minute turn, and how did you deal with those stress moments? I'm like, journalism is 100% stress sometimes. So let me tell you about all the stress moments I've had on deadline or something like that. So yeah, I felt like I was pretty well prepared based on my background as a journalist to kind of sell myself as someone who could make the transition. But I don't know if I would have gotten that opportunity had I not had that connection within the company. I'm thankful to this day that that was available to me.
Yeah, people in interviews have asked me, how do you deal with deadline writing? I said, will never give me a tougher deadline.
Yeah, that's true.
When you had to make that transition, obviously you had to educate yourself on what this industry was even like. Like you said, you didn't even necessarily know what UX writing even was when you first heard, hey, you should apply. What was that educational process like? Were there books you read? Were there certain activities you did or places you went online to learn? What was that process like?
Yeah, a lot of it was just trying to discover the UX writing community throughout the world. And it's still something that's a hobby of mine to this day, where I'm trying to study voices on LinkedIn. There's the UX writing hashtag, the content design hashtag. So, and with that hashtag, you can view posts and various people use those and see essays and things like that. So anyway, that was kind of the ground level for me, learning about things. I learned about a content and UX, I think that's what it's called, Facebook group that has over like 10,000 members, people throughout the industry. And so I joined that Facebook group and read those posts. And there's a Slack group too, dedicated to UX writing and UX writers that's really popular throughout the country and world. They have things like job postings on there, just discussions about microcopy and different projects that people work on within the UX writing space. So it's a great online community. I joined that. And yeah, a lot of it was just reading Medium articles. My boss actually gave me a great list of things that she'd collected over time too, as part of my onboarding, which is fantastic, just to give me a baseline understanding of the job I was entering. So there were a lot of different sources and voices that kind of pieced together my understanding of what UX writing was. And it's kind of interesting thinking about how I did that at the time. Like, I guess I wasn't scared. I probably should have been more scared, just trying to learn something new on the fly. But I think this is a testament to like anyone can do something if they're just driven enough to do it, and don't be scared about jumping into an unknown space. If you really want to do something and have a passion for, storytelling still happens in UX writing, a passion for words, things like that, this is a great space, and don't be intimidated by it being unfamiliar to you.
Well, I think that's a great segue into like the kind of questions that I have to ask you. I think a lot of times is, you want to make sure you fit all like little buckets in like a job description, right? But I think part of it is also the mindset that you have. So in your opinion, what are the top 3 like qualities or the type of mindset you should approach when like, or advice you would give for moving into or exploring a UX role, especially if you're not, haven't done that before?
Yeah, no, I think I was fortunate because a lot of my journalism traits and things I had to use as a journalist are transferable into the UX writing space. So I think anyone who's just curious about the world is a big thing. And when I'm working on a project, you kind of have to be curious about the best possible content solution for what I'm designing at the time with words. So I just think being curious is just a good trait to have as a person in general, but especially within this space, I think that's good. Someone who's empathetic as well. We talk about being the making the user the hero of their own journey, or just being kind of like a calming presence for a user in maybe a difficult scenario where there's an error on the screen or something. It's stuff like that. You have to be an empathetic person and use the right voice and tone for the situation. So you have to be self-aware, I guess, of what how someone might view your words on the screen in a difficult situation or a good situation too, and you want to match that moment. So I think that's important too. And I think someone who's interested in even like research or diving into content related solutions that maybe aren't the prettiest sometimes, like they might live in Excel documents, or you might develop processes that a customer won't see, but they'll influence design decisions later on, too. I think that's an interesting trait to have, where you can spot inconsistencies throughout your experience and be like, oh, we call something X over here while it's Y in this area of our app, or on our support side, there's some inconsistency there. So you have to be kind of a word nerd in that way, where you like spotting inconsistencies, or you do research where you find out that a word that your company's used forever isn't the most effective anymore. So, I think that's important too, where you're interested in like finding out if the content you're using is the best possible solution for that moment. So it's a mix of left brain, right brain stuff, where, empathy and problem solving is involved, and also some creativeness too. So yeah, it's really exciting, especially for a person like me who just likes that kind of stuff and likes to dive into those things.